Welcome back to Couch Talk, everybody. I just got out of the screening of Venom, and I'm going to start off by saying this. The critics are half wrong, half right. This movie is directed by Ruben Fletcher. He did Zombieland with Woody Harrelson, and he did 30 Minutes or Less, and he did Gangster Squad. Now, two out of those three movies are reviewed pretty high. Gangster Squad is the one that isn't reviewed pretty high. I actually like Gangster Squad a lot. It wasn't that good of a story, but I thought the style was really cool. Had a lot of great action in it, and all the actors just, they brought their A game to it. But Ruben Fletcher isn't a bad director. He hasn't directed a lot, but he's not a bad director by any means of the word bad. This movie stars Tom Hardy, Riz Ahmed, and Michelle Williams. They're like really the three main characters. Woody Harrelson is in there for a brief little second, but I won't spoil anything or as into why he's in there. If there is a sequel for this movie, he'll be in that. So this movie, I keep seeing reviews of people saying that this movie belongs in the 2000s, and that's absolutely true. We live in a world where all these superhero movies are, in my firm belief, if you took away the fact that these were superhero movies, some of these movies could probably stand tall, like, especially in Oscar season. I thought that The Winter Soldier was a fantastic thriller. And, I mean, it's a Captain America movie, but it works even if it isn't, just because it's so well written. And then you have people like Nolan coming in and making the Batman movies, and there's just a very high standard to what a superhero movie should be, and there's always supposed to be a lot of tension, a lot of shit on the line, like, it's always very intricate. And this movie definitely does feel like almost a buddy cop movie from, like, the early 2000s. Like, it feels to me like Bad Boys. Like, my biggest interpretation of the relationship between Tom Hardy, Eddie Brock, and Venom, it's Will Smith and Martin Lawrence from Bad Boys. Will Smith is Venom and Martin Lawrence is Tom Hardy, because he's kind of like he's hesitant to do things and he's scared, and, Venom's like stop being a baby kind of character, and I kept getting that vibe. And you don't get that in superhero movies a lot now, which is why I think a lot of critics are trashing this movie. They hold superhero movies to such a high standard now that you can't just make a fun action flick. Like, it has to have like a superb story, which this doesn't. It doesn't really have a story except for Tom Hardy learning how to deal with this symbiote that's taking over his body. We had a movie that was kind of similar to this, Upgrade, that not a whole lot of people saw. It came out a couple months ago and only made a couple $1 million. But the real story of this movie is just him dealing with this new thing in him, and there's no overarching, like, super duper villain that's, like, planning to take over the world, or, like, it's a very confined and small story about man versus creature, if you will. There's not a lot at stake here until the very end, and although Riz Ahmed is in it and he plays the main antagonist in the movie, even that seems very small compared to what we're dealing with in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Thanos, which is another thing. You come from seeing that movie, which there's so much at stake, and it's so well written, that you go to something like this, and it's kind of like, well, what's the point of it all if the story's not good? But the point of it all is just to see, Venom getting justice and getting a movie made about him. I think this movie would have benefited a little bit if it was rated R, because Venom is a very violent character, and I would have liked to see him, like, ripping people's limbs off and, like, eating people, and you do get that a little bit, but it's very PG-13-esque. I mean, the movie's PG-13, but, like, there's no blood, and they, like, cut away really quick after, like he'll go to bite somebody, and, like, you'll see him initially bite them, but then it'll cut away, and it doesn't really, like, let loose on the carnage the way I would have liked to see it. No pun intended. I know Carnage is a character. The violence was honestly the biggest letdown for me in this movie. All the action scenes, they were very, like, the action scenes alone could have been PG. It was kind of just him picking people up and, like, throwing them. And the last fight was kind of anticlimactic. Very anticlimactic. I was very disappointed by the ending fight. It was a big CGI mess, meshing together. Like, if you've seen the trailer, it's him and, like, the other symbiote Riot, like, fighting, but they're, like, transforming and phasing. It's almost like, think of, like, Autobots, like, shifting, like, into, like, their Autobot form, like, how it looks, like, all, like, weird, and, like, all this shit's going on at once. You can't really understand what's happening because there's so much shit happening. That's kind of like what this ending fight looked like. So that was a little disappointing, but I loved the relationship between Eddie Brock and Venom. I see people keep relating him to, like, he's honing in, like, his Jim Carrey from Liar Liar. I I see why they're saying that, because he does act a little goofy in this movie. He does like a little weird, but you got to understand that he's trying to come to terms with the fact that there's this parasite. Well, I can't say parasite. There's this symbiote. There's this thing inside him warping his insides, and it's making him sick. And everyone knows, like, when you're sick, you know, you're very short-tempered and you're irritated, and that's what he's trying to portray here. But he's doing it in a manner that, like, none of us could understand because we don't have something like that going on. So trying to keep that in your mind, that he's trying to hold a conversation with somebody while there's this thing inside of his brain controlling him, and it's making him act kind of weird. So I kind of like that dynamic. I didn't think his performance was bad. Like I said, I loved the relationship between him and Venom. I loved how, like, Venom was in his head and nobody else could hear him. But Venom had some of the funniest moments in the movie, just like him telling Eddie to do stuff that, like, Eddie was like, what are you talking about? Like, just those little moments of, like, just their banter was really good. Michelle Williams was kind of wasted here. I mean, she was great in it. She's a great actress in everything she is. I loved her in Manchester by the Sea, and she's phenomenal, but they really didn't give her much to do. Riz Ahmed, he is also a fantastic actor, but he also gets virtually no chance to shine with his acting chops. He is a very cliched villain. He's really just there to give us a big fight at the end. He does give some sort of story to this movie as into why all this is happening, but it's just really Riz Ahmed's character. He's not intimidating. He's not, like, his goals just don't line up with why he acts the way he acts. Like, he's all about, like, helping people, and he's just a terrible person. It just didn't fit. It didn't work for me, and Riz Ahmed's portrayal of this character just didn't work. So the critics giving this movie a 30% is completely ridiculous, because I had so much fun with this movie. I laughed a lot. I thought the acting was good. I thought Tom Hardy was great trying to, you know, capture this role and make it his own. He really cared about it. His son, like, asked him to take this role, so he was mainly doing it for his son, but he also likes the character. The directing was phenomenal, except for the action scenes. But, like, the movie itself looked great. I never had a problem with the CGI until the very end, and it wasn't the CGI that I had a problem with. It was just the way they chose to make the fight scene happen at the end. I really didn't like that. I thought the movie was a little short, actually. I was never bored, or I never felt like it was dragging or anything. The only other problem I have with it is, as much as I liked the comedy and thought it worked, tonally it was kind of all over the place. Like, the beginning of the movie, it was kind of like a thriller. And even up until the part where he first gets the symbiote inside of him, it was, like, not scary, but it was, like, tense and, like, thrilling. And, like, the music, it was, like, creepy and, like, ominous. And then it shifted into, like, super comedy and lost all of that. And I don't know if it's because the studio meddled and said they wanted more comedy, or if they wanted more tension, so they changed the beginning or they changed the middle. But whatever the case is, they completely shifted tones, and although I didn't hate either tone, it took a while to adjust to the fact that it completely changed, and it just seemed kind of like two different movies. So I can't say that this movie is amazing, because by no means it isn't. But it is not 30% bad on Rotten Tomatoes. It is nowhere near as terrible as Suicide Squad or Spider-Man 3 or anything like that, or Catwoman. People are relating it to Catwoman. Catwoman was fucking horrible. This is nowhere near that bad. I'm going to give this movie a 65%. Although I think the diehard fans are going to be the ones that are most disappointed, because they kind of did away with his entire backstory of how the creator made him. But it's not because they don't know what they're doing with the character, but it's because they're trying to create him in a world without Spider-Man, and everyone knows that the creation of Eddie Brock getting Venom was created from the symbiote going to, Spider-Man first, Peter Parker. But because they don't have him, they had to create a new little story. So I think that the die-hard fans might be a little turned off, but the average everyday goer, go and see this movie because it's really good. They do set up a sequel in the mid-credits scene, and it got me even 3 times as excited as I was at the thought of there being a sequel, because it's just awesome. So stay for the mid-credits scene. There is a very final end credits scene at the very end of the credits, but it has nothing to do with the movie. So if you want to stay, I would suggest looking it up on mediastinger.com. They'll tell you what it is, and you can decide for yourself if you want to stay or not. But yeah, so I'd recommend go see this in the movie theater. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Are you excited for this movie? Do you want to see a sequel? Do you hate it? If so, let's talk about it. And as always, I'll catch you next time.